I'm gonna.
Do a brief introduction for those who may be watching this later so that they have a sense of who you are, Joshua. Welcome to Open Ed Week with SUNY Online. Joshua Korenblat is an associate professor of graphic design at SUNY New Paltz, who specializes in the vivid storytelling of complex information, which is a line I love. I think that's a great statement. As a reviews editor for Design and Culture, he also researches how designers shape culture, and he's co-taught a sustainability living learning community course and authored book chapters on design and sustainability. He's worked at National Geographic Magazine and Science News, and co-founded and served as art director at Graphicacy, which is a data design firm. So, Joshua, we're really interested to hear more about this project.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so this is a project. It's called Earthrise Commons. It's an open educational resource, and we're really grateful to have received support from two SUNY Innovative Instructional Technology grants for OER Impact, and that's really made a lot of this work possible around all of our other responsibilities. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the project here, and we can start with the team. So the team is composed of me. That's a little doodle of me with my dog on my shoulder, and Sarah Wyman, who is also at SUNY New Paltz. She's a associate professor in English and comparative literature, and really specializes in environmental literature. Christoph Lalicki, who is our developer for this project, and he's also adjunct faculty at SUNY New Paltz. Genevieve Flynn, she's a master's degree student in English who's focused on the editorial side of this project. Olivia Wilson, who's a recent graduate of the graphic design program at SUNY New Paltz, specialized in user experience design. Stefan Macaluso, who's a librarian at Sojourner Truth Library at SUNY New Paltz. Samrat Pathania, who is a high school physics teacher at Walk Hill High School and also a board member of the Mid-Hudson Teachers Center, which administers the New York State Teaching Fellows Program, to help kind of give us one of those big collaborative networks. And Nicole Simon, who is a professor of biology at Nassau Community College down in Long Island. An earlier round of this, also we had Paul Hirsch, who's a professor of environmental leadership at SUNY ESF. So I just wanted to acknowledge everyone in this project. It is a commons project, so it really is a more kind of horizontal and collaborative way of working rather than a top-down way of working that we've been experimenting with here in building this. So let's see if I can. There we go. Okay, so one of the questions I have is from that same book I just mentioned before, Serviceberry from Robin Wall Kimmerer, which is how do we move from an institution that's a place of belongings to a place of belonging? And that's a paraphrase from that book. And we've been working on this project together for since 2023, but it's also has roots that go much deeper than that. So the first part of this project is an open access book. That Sarah Wyman and I co-edited called Sustainability Learning for Action and Community Engagement. It hasn't been published yet. That's been part of the story here. It would have been published a long time ago, but we decided to make it open access. And with that came a book processing charge of nearly $16,000. And so we had to raise money for that. Yes, I think that is part of the story here, how difficult it is to convert a traditional book to open access. But we were able to do that thanks to the grants from both SUNY and also Primary Source, Massachusetts-based educational nonprofit. The other part of this project is Earthrise Commons. And while we were editing this book, we realized that a lot of the material would actually work better online. For example, lesson plans. We have a number of musicians who contributed, and artists. And like one big kind of value proposition in the book is the relationship between the arts and sustainability. And a lot of that material was like it could go online. And I realized I have some experience building things like that. And that really got us interested in kind of this interwoven book and learning commons experience to see what we could create and make the book more of a living resource rather than an archive of an idea of ideas. Um, So just a little of the kind of philosophy background behind this project. We're really interested in the thought that open educational resources work with this idea of a commons, and it's also really a big part of sustainability. Back in 1968, Garrett Hardin had that famous phrase about the tragedy of the commons. There are links here if you guys want to read or watch more about this topic. And the tragedy of the commons was basically this idea that in an open ecological setting, if everyone were sharing the space, like for example, sheep or cows in a pasture, that eventually the resource would be used up because people act in their own self-interests. Eleanor Ostrom later questioned that theory and earned a Nobel Prize in economics for her work. And what she discovered was that traditional communities around the world actually do work well in a commons and collaborate together. And what they need is good governance in order to do that. And they kind of set the rules, and people actually do share well. Later on, Creative Commons was built by Lawrence Lessig and many other people. And it took that idea of collaboration and made it play, a digital place where you could remix material. And so we kind of like looked at all those different relationships and thought that what we really need to do to build a commons is make it open, but have a good set of rules in place, including a Creative Commons license, and work with this idea of a gardener that we can put this content online, but we want it to be really high quality and curate it. And all of that would be a learning experience for both faculty and students and people from the community. So no matter which viewpoint you take here, the question that they're asking is how do we share the world well? And I think that's the question um, that is very pertinent to education these days. So our platform is for educators, students, and community partners. And we really are leveraging existing networks on our campuses and building this out of partnerships and friendships and seeing how it grows. Okay. So it's kind of a symbiotic relationship. The idea is that we've got this prototype that we're working from. So this is a site that we're working towards. Um, and you can go to this Learning Commons. And let's say I wanted to go and check out this book chapter on campus as a living lab. And this is from a professor at SUNY New Paltz who does bird watching projects on campus with students. And one of her insights was that when you have more, canopy that overlaps in a place, you get more diversity in birds. To kind of simplify her ideas here a little bit, but so here is like access to her project, and then you'd be able to remix this project, download it, and adapt it to your own community. And then if you wish, you can repost it here. So you can go through and download the chapter as a PDF or view it on Springer Link. You can also get resources from this project that you can download and then remix, and then you can contribute. So that's kind of the heart of the idea. But we do have like a code of conduct, as I mentioned before, um, and an open call of submissions. But we're actually finding we're getting a lot of submissions again through our in-person communities, which I think is an important aspect of all this. And then we'll have a table of contents for the book, which you can read either on here or on Springer Link directly, which is a really big hub for, I'll just see if I can find Springer Link here. There we are. There we are. So Springer Link has 285 million annual views, so it's a really huge repository for books and journals and chapters. And open access, the data on it's pretty strong. Open access books have 2.4 times more citations than non-open access books on average. They have 10 times more downloads than non-open access books on average. and open access books have 10 times more online mentions than non-OA books on average. So you can see you can go here to download any of our OA books for free. Um, but as far as I know, all of these had a very expensive book processing charge applied to them. And the original print cost of our book was $128. And we decided to go with building this Learning Commons and getting this book open access through the support of grants because we thought it's important that people can actually um, read our book and have easy access to it. So that's the prototype. The actual project is online here. And you can see it looks like the prototype, but it's still in the process of being built. So some of the usability is still in progress. And I'll kind of filter here. So you can look at different lesson plans right here. And so this was a community inspiration map, a workshop that I held last fall with students and Olivia Wilson, our UX designer. And you can kind of go here and get a sense for um, what this project was all about. This is like a slide deck. And all this is Creative Commons licensed. You can download it and then use these resources as you wish to do your own uh, project as either a remix or as a riff on that project. So just to kind of give you a kind of a flavor for what this is all about. People who want to have both their faces and their work published online as part of these experiences. We have resources for understanding the Creative Commons for students. And these are contracts that you can like download and print and give to students as well. So the Creative Commons part is often very interesting for students as well to like understand how that whole ecosystem works, which is so different than kind of traditional academic textbooks. Okay, so a little bit more of the origins of this project. So it started off at SUNY New Paltz, and we have a pretty thriving sustainability faculty learning community on campus. And it really grew out of that network. We basically invited educators on our campus and also community partners to describe how they teach sustainability in a chapter form. And we didn't have a publisher yet. And we put all the responses together and did the book proposal. We're able to get the book contract and then convert it to open access, get everyone to agree to Creative Commons. So that was a big part of that. Again, those in-person partnerships that we already had on our campus. But we do want it to kind of go global. So one thing about the book is the editors read it and said we would like an international perspective in it too. So we also have contributors from Saudi Arabia and Sweden and South Africa. And we also have indigenous voices uh, in the book as well, particularly from the University of Alaska. And we're really happy to see that happen. Um, the platform itself is completely open source, so any institution can replicate it. It's on GitHub. So if there's a developer out there who's familiar with GitHub, we tried to keep it really simple. All the pages are actually written in what's called Markdown format, which is really just a formatting format in a flat file format that then gets converted using a static site generator into like a website. So we're trying to keep the back end of this really kind of simple. Um, so anyone can actually replicate this whole project as a developer and make their own learning commons from it or change it and then put it back up on GitHub. And the project itself then is open source. So it's open source from the code and all the way to the content, which is open access. So we really like that idea that knowledge can kind of circulate freely without borders and paywalls as part of this work that we're doing. This is a little bit of the timeline that we've been working with. For the past 3 years, we've been working on this book manuscript, and it's currently in editorial production and in the final stages of that. Should be ready this spring, I think. It is a big project. We have 50 contributors. So that's a lot of correspondences and things to tie up on that side. 2025, thanks to our first IITG grant, we were able to build that prototype and get it launched and tested with feedback. And then we also had that Commons that I just showed you go live and make it ready for educators to explore it and contribute. Um, this spring, we're also hosting workshops, events, and a symposia that will bring educators together around the shared ideas that are in the book and on Earthrise Commons. And that's where we really want, kind of theory to meet practice in real community gatherings. This summer, we anticipate we can have the full ecosystem in place, the book, the platform, and the community all kind of reinforcing each other into this kind of living learning commons. There's some additional features that we are also interested in implementing. One of them is a community inspiration map. So we can have a landing page where it's actually a map-based view. And you can see with every contributor, we have metadata on where they're from and what institution they work at. That could be pinpointed on a map. And then you can go to the map in a tooltip and it will take you to their projects. So more of a map-based way of exploring this information. The other benefit of this idea, in discussing it with Samrat on our team, who teaches high school, is that that can actually be its own kind of project for educators to say, hey, what type of sustainability learning experiences are happening, around the world or in your local community, and the students can do research about that and maybe propose their own. So it provides an additional way to contribute. Okay, so yeah, I think like the three interleaved kind of energizers for our project are keeping it open source. Um, we're not using WordPress, which was a pretty controversial move, but it does keep it truly open source. There's no plugins or anything like that, and we think it also makes it sustainable because the way the site is built is using just kind of some best practices in open source web development. The worst case scenario is it becomes a really nice complement to this book and an archive for that, but we really do think through in-person events, workshops, conferences, symposia, and the involvement of students and faculty that we can have these contributions keep coming in even past the book chapters and what the book authors are contributing to this project. This photo is by Suzanne Stokes, and it's foundation students at SUNY New Paltz at Ashokan Center. This artwork is by Andrea Kanchowitz, these are all contributors to this project. She teaches art education at SUNY New Paltz. So we do have a symposium on April 10th at SUNY New Paltz called the Regeneration Symposium. And it's going to touch upon topics like environmental storytelling, the circular economy, environmental justice, and sustainability in athletics. I just wanted to show you this event right here. Okay, so there is a sign up. I know not everyone is local here, but we love to see you. Steph, there is going to be a talk about information access as a human right with our collaborator, Stefan Macaluso. And so there is a special focus on the library. But we're also really trying to show that sustainability doesn't need to be limited to the environmental science catalog at the school or environmental policy, that it's really everywhere. We shouldn't just leave it to only experts alone to make sustainability a topic in their coursework, that you can integrate this in all kinds of surprising ways. So one of our keynote speakers for this event is Alia Kanso, who's the sustainability coordinator for the Golden State Warriors basketball team, for example. And then we also have another keynote from Dr. Demond Hill, who is also an author in the book. He's a professor at Tufts University and a great speaker. And his talk is about the ecologies of othering and belonging. Because we really also believe that sustainability is about peace. It's about creating strong partnerships and harmonies between people, the rest of the natural world, and also within ourselves. And this is a topic that I think is naturally appealing to students, that they actually already care about this topic quite a bit. The next day, there's also a follow-up event with the Hudson Valley Writers Project on Saturday about teaching climate literacy at the City New Paltz campus. So all this material is, we try to then draw it into our publishing schedule and get people to contribute based on work they're already doing. Um, and um, yeah, so that's a resource. And then this is also one of our partners here, Eddie. It's kind of a similar project to what we started up. Um, and it's basically this idea of um, to complement the kind of pipeline model of education that we can also prototype new ways to collaborate on campus. And this is kind of more on the social realm. We do a lot of um, different projects with students that are a little bit different than typical models of education. And so this is a project that both Sarah and I were involved with before we worked on the book together. So all this to say that the technology part's important, but the people are more important than the ideas. And so having people around who really care about what you're doing and working in earnest on a project, I find people want to help you, and that's been just a great experience. Okay, so some of the obstacles of our project, as I mentioned before, is creating an anthology, coordinating all the revisions and the editorial feedback, and in particular, the permissions process took probably about an extra year than what our original timeline um, thought we would take. Some faculty were uncomfortable with having a Creative Commons license on their chapter contribution. They had questions like, well, you know, uh, can anybody kind of take my chapter and use it for their own purposes? It's a very different model, right, from kind of paywalled academic publishing. So that took a lot to resolve because we had to get everyone to agree. The publisher does allow individual chapters to have different Creative Commons settings on them. So as you guys all know, Creative Commons has a lot of different settings and you can apply to them with varying levels of restrictions. But ultimately, I do believe everyone landed on the same Creative Commons license to kind of simplify things. The other obstacle for this project is just the pace of university. We're really grateful for the support. Our campus is under what's called institutional review. So we have like 4 layers of review for getting most paperwork related to the grant approved. And so the managing the budget and money part of that project is taking a little bit more time than expected as well. And then of course we've got this is a faculty and student run experience, so we all have full plates already. We don't have any course releases for this work. It really is in many ways a passion project and a creative research project. And so I could see in the future, like, asking for a course release or something like that to create more time during the semester. We tend to do a lot of planning work during the semester and then implementing work after, the semesters are complete. Um, Another kind of idea that we're really interested in is the idea of a third place. This is from sociologist Ray Oldenburg. A third place is neither home nor work. Home is your first place, and then work is your second place. And then a third place is basically a community hub. This is a what you might call a leveler. Like no matter where you're coming from in life, everyone has equal status. It has an informal quality to it and welcoming quality to it. So you can think of places like your favorite coffee shop or a barber shop or a community center. these are places that we don't have as much of that we need today. And so a third place can be a physical third place, but it can also be a digital third place. And that did present a challenge for us because this is a bespoke project using open source development. So we couldn't really implement any social media technology to that would kind of make the project out of scope in terms of the budget and the time. Um, but we are implementing features like this remix again, so you can download any material on the site, whether it's a lesson or a resource or an essay or a book chapter, and post adapt it and then post it as a remix. So we're really excited about that component and getting it really running on the site. The other component that we think might help is creating a Substack. So we do have like a Substack, which is functioning like a newsletter and a blog. And that does have a podcast feature as well. So we're interested in these in-person events, getting more recordings that can be included on our platform as well, to really make it feel less like a database repository and more like um, a community hub. Um, so that was kind of a brief overview of our project. I really thank you for your time today. This We do think of this as a prototype, so it's open. We welcome anyone in. If you're working on sustainability education in any form, at any scale, you don't need to. It doesn't need to be a central part of your work. It could be something that you're trying to sprinkle in to your work. We'd love to welcome you into this commons. And we encourage you, after the session too, to explore the platform, download, contribute. You can riff off of ideas, remix. You can attend these events, or you can simply read the book when it gets published. Should be this spring. And on Springerlink, it should be pretty easy to find. Uh, every connection that we can create here can strengthen this ecosystem. And we really want educators and community partners to feel not lonely, bringing sustainability into their class, to feel like there is a network that of support there for them. So this is a platform again, earthrisecommons.org. And it's just a little invitation. You can always bring your friend as well. Um, we're a really friendly community that we're building as well. So I'll go ahead and go to the platform again. And maybe I'll filter it for just people here, just so you can see our community. So it really is quite a lot of folks from different parts of mainly SUNY, but we do have people from all over the world here, from every discipline. And uh, Libby's also wrote the foreword to our book, and she's also a folk musician. And so there is an obvious advantage to working online is that you can post video and interactive formats that you can't in a book. And I think one thing that we're discovering is that the lesson plans, while they're useful, a lot of these more kind of open um, uh, teaching materials that are getting posted are becoming really interesting conversation pieces in class. And so something as simple as a music video or a short recording or a brief essay is getting good results in our classroom, not just the lesson plans, which is how I kind of initially envisioned this platform working. Um, yeah. So I've got about a long list of things that I'm currently getting publishing, but another example project would be I do this project in my art direction class called Haiku Comics. And then students use those haiku comics as a foundation to do a campaign for the Japan National Tourism Organization. But like all the specifics of that can be adapted to any kind of setting um, because haiku are pretty portable. And so like this is my lesson plan. This is a deeper lesson plan using understanding by design. And so I think we're also just kind of testing out, which formats will work and trying to get that to be more standardized as well. Um, and yeah, just kind of see what we can learn by having a bias toward action, getting things published with review and permission from folks, and then putting these out there in the world. Um, yeah, so that's the project. I think we're doing really well time-wise. I was curious if anyone had any questions or wanted to open up the floor to conversation here.
Yeah, I think that's a great use of the rest of our time. Certainly given us a lot to think about and to spend time exploring in the comments.
Hmm.
I think that's where we all want to get our hands in there and see and look around. There's so much there that you've all curated. And I think that this is a wonderful, wonderful resource. So thank you for sharing that with us. So I would
Hmm.
invite anyone who is here, and I know Ben, you just joined us as well. If you have questions or comments or thoughts about, how this might apply to your work, please do share.
Well, I'll just chime in really quickly. I mean, one of the it's an opportunity, but also kind of a challenge with using OER and some of these great sources that people are publishing as open and freely available. Is just kind of looking in all the different corners to find these things. So,
Hmm.
I can imagine a scenario where someone who's not familiar with this project, but they're working with faculty who are interested in sustainability or would love a lesson like this, and just making sure it's discoverable, right? And so that this good work is out there. And so I think
Hmm.
this is both kind of maybe a question if you guys have thought about this or tackled this, but also
Hmm.
just a general comment. To what extent can we make this easily discoverable, and even to the point like at our library we're working really hard to find open access publishers, publications, like open access databases with open access journals, all that stuff, and
Hmm.
trying to link them to our discovery system so
Hmm.
that someone could come to our library and still find the millions and millions of great articles and publications that are openly accessed. And so, I'm just kind of curious, and I feel like, again, opening up the conversation, one of the great challenges is how do we make sure someone can find this pretty easily if they didn't attend this talk and if they're not already available, already aware that it exists.
Hmm. Yeah, great thought. Did anybody else want to chime in with that? Yeah, so I yeah, I agree that that's definitely a central concern of the project. We were worried when it was just a $128 print book that very few people would actually read this, and we felt like there was a lot of great material in there. So that was the main motivation for doing this. Um, at least from the publisher side, it gets published in, HTML format, and then it also gets published in a variety of other digital formats. I think you can get this on certainly the Kindle and other databases. I know that Stephen Macaluso was mentioning the DOAB database was another one. So there are this will go up on a lot of open access digital repositories. Search engine optimization is a really important part of this as well. Like so if someone's searching for these topics, that it comes up pretty high. And so despite our challenges working with a big publisher like Palgrave, Macmillan, Springer Nature, we did like the fact that Springer Link has so many views and you can they share those metrics and they're a lot. Like so I can't remember right now, but like the average open access sustainability book does get a lot of traffic on the site. And then if you search for it, it might be a hit that comes up really early on in the search, at least the way that searches are currently working. So like one of our contributors is Ilarion Merculeaf, and I was just looking um, at, where the search lands with him. And Um, we're already pretty high on this. We're right on that first Google page, and he's given a lot of talks, and we only had one project posted from him related to the his chapter in our book, and it's already. So I was kind of pleased to see that. Like it was, coming up pretty prominently. So we definitely do want visibility for this project. And I think maybe our workaround in the interim is just leveraging our networks, making this um, kind of human, a human in-person experience too, not just a digital experience. Oh, and I guess the social media part is pretty big these days. We're trying out Substack. I definitely, and probably many of you guys share that too. Just I'm wary of some of the other social media platforms, but I am on LinkedIn and other places, so that's always a good way to spread the word as well.
I think, Ben, you bring up a really good point, though. It's a very big challenge to find all of there's so much terrific information and resources out there, but how do we find that? So if I'm a faculty member and I want to get started with some of this, it's almost overwhelming to know where to begin. And
Hmm.
having those resources on your campus, I think, is important too. We have in SUNY, we have OER leads on our campuses that are involved with our centralized system admin,
Hmm.
SUNY OER services. And so that's a network that we've built across our system to be able to connect people around projects. And these academic innovation grants, particularly in OER, are another way to kind of get that information disseminated about who's doing what across our system. But it's still a challenge. And to know these things that are happening in other institutions and in other organizations. You raise a really good point. And Joshua, I think the point about um, researching your platforms and knowing what their metrics are and knowing what their reach is very important when you're trying to make those decisions about where to put your work and where to license it. So. Mary Jo?
Wow, my head is going 100 directions, so I'm not quite sure where where to start this. But I just wanted to say, yes, even after the project gets going, the marketing of it, and you're right, the keeping it going, the visible, making it visible to in libraries, from libraries, but also from all the outside places that you talked about, LinkedIn, all the different ways that people are trying to do that, and it is a job in and of itself. So it's interesting to me that you're partnering. It's so interesting that you've got Springer Link on the one side, and on the other hand, you've got this GitHub platform. That it seems like an interesting collaborative partnership. I guess I'm wondering how did you zero in on Springer Link? And my real question is, who's your audience? Are the students that you think are most likely? Which kind of courses and classes? It seems like so widespread. Who do you really think are likely to be the courses that are most likely to be using parts of this or chapters or putting it together how they want, remixing it?
Uh-huh. Yeah, those are good questions. Well, honestly, like the Palgrave Macmillan Springer Nature, uh, that was I had worked contributed to an anthology before this, and so I just knew about them. So it was just a guess, like why not send it over there? And that's how we that's how we got the contract. So I didn't realize some of the aspects of working with such a big publisher. It's like it's definitely feels a little bit more industrial. I guess I don't know what the word is. And the communication hasn't been great often. So yeah, that was how we kind of committed to that publisher and or just learning from experience. The audience for this, yeah, the book is really wide because it grew out of our sustainability faculty learning community, which represents like the entire campus. So I had that question too. Like we it's definitely weighted more toward the arts, honestly. Like we have a lot of contributions from artists and musicians, but we do have contributions from people who teach chemistry and physics and um, that. we kind of like that stream education model. So science, technology, um, science, technology, arts, and math. And we added in the R. This is something that we did with Eddie, which means relationships. Um, and not, not making it, not worrying about that boundary that we can kind of cross-pollinate between those disciplines. So we've been using this teaching material in our classes as part of our grant. And so for example, we have an essay from Eric Keeling, who teaches environmental science at SUNY New Paltz, and it's part about climate change and part like a personal essay about things that are on his mind. And we've introduced that into like the English classroom, and it's been really good discussion and material. I wish my co-PI Sarah was here because she's the one who talked about that quite a bit. I Everything that I'm publishing are things that I'm actually teaching in my classes, and my hope is that my classes are a little bit narrow. Like I teach in graphic design, but like these lesson plans could get adapted into different settings if you wanted to bring more visual work into your classroom. For example, haiku, comics, like are you could teach haiku in a variety of classrooms, including science classrooms, I believe, and sprinkle in some visual work into it to make it more engaging. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but we part of the impact for the IITG grant is to introduce this work into the classroom, um, and get kind of qualitative feedback from the in-person experience, and then we have metrics in the digital experience that will kind of tell us how many people are actually engaged with the project. Yeah.
I also wanted to ask, I can empathize entirely with getting 50 people to sign off on Creative Commons licenses, but you said they all did for the book, they all did agree. Which license did they wind up going with? Did you all wind up going with? I am curious about that.
Yeah,
For
it's a
one thing.
yeah, Creative Commons non-commercial license. So it was the non-commercial license. Yeah, they discouraged the share alike. Share alike apparently isn't very good. Um, I didn't focus on the details of the Creative Commons license quite as much. Stephen Macaluso was really like the expert on that for our project. I found it kind of quite confusing because like
Yep,
there's all these different scenarios you can play out. That seemed a little confusing to me. But basically, you can reuse and remix the work, but only for non-commercial purposes. That was a big concern for some of our contributors, particularly like um, well, Eric Keeling in particular, who I just mentioned, but then also some of the artists who are contributing. Um, and um, as you know, there is a lot of piracy online these days. Uh,
sure.
this kind of also got started around when AI was starting to come out, so make its debut. So
Uh,
um,
i-
uh,
is
yeah.
there any I think there is, but but let me know. Are there avenues for students to contribute to this as well, or to add chapters or whatever these modules are?
Uh, yeah, for
Be
sure.
included in them?
Yeah, right now it is a little faculty heavy, but we also are including um, community partners and students. Genevieve, she's a gardener for our site, so she's a student, a master's degree student at SUNY New Paltz in English, and so she's actually handling all the content that gets submitted. We've got a big like spreadsheet tracker, and she reads all the material and makes comments and corresponds with the different authors, and that's been a really good learning experience. Christoph, he's a developer. We are planning to hire like a student to work on the development of this project, some of the usability aspects. And like, there's lots of different opportunities. Like, these are my students from my information design class, where we work on a project called Small Multiples, where you basically make a bunch of postage stamps along a similar theme to make comparisons. Um, and the students tend to be pretty eager to, I find there's a subset of students in all my classes who want to get their work out there and get it published and find this really intriguing. So this will only continue to grow. because our existing networks involve a lot of students. So the Regeneration Symposium is actually being co-organized with students. And that's one of the principles of our EDI project is the students are really heavily involved. Um, and we find again, like at least on our campus, the students already really care about these topics, and they're energized to know that faculty care about these topics too.
I have one more, and this is a slightly different direction, and I
Hmm.
don't know if you can answer it, but I understand, if you're publishing a book in the traditional sense or basically in any sense, um, at the end of the year when you do your annual review, you could say, I published a chapter and people understand what a book chapter is. A lot of these
Hmm.
things are what I call public facing scholarship. I don't know how else to explain
Uh-huh.
that. And I'm wondering, are your faculty able to claim them as, what do they claim them in their annual reviews? Is it scholarship? Is it teaching? What do they call this kind of forward-facing enterprise?
Um, yeah, that's a great question.
Service? I don't know.
Apologies too. This is my dog. He was barking quite loudly during the presentation, so I figured I'll just hold him here. Um, so yeah, it's a great question. That was one challenge that we encountered was people were like, I'd like to devote more to this project, but like it's not really supported, in my case, if you're like going up for tenure or reappointment. And th I think that's a project that like is ongoing. It's a little bit murky. We wrote letters of support to people to talk about what they were doing, to help them make that case. The other problem was with the book chapters because it took so long to come out. Like some people were anticipating the book to already be published and it wasn't. So we had to keep up our correspondences and let them know they can include it in their dossiers. Um, but I think there should be a lot more support for open scholarship. I think that that could be its own conference, I think. Just more incentive and more support to do it. Um, and I think that the other challenge too, particularly from people in the sciences, is that they have a lot of standards that they're already trying to meet. So like I'd love to introduce sustainability, but I already need to teach them calculus or something like that. Um, how can I do that? And so I think that's also why, even though we're weighted more toward the arts because of our backgrounds, we wanted to include the scientists in this project because we actually think they can, and maybe these disciplines can work together more to do that. So yeah, but I'm curious what you all think too. I think that's a great question. It sounded like with Benjamin in Nevada, he was saying that at least in the library that it was challenging to get support for open access. What is it like for you all?
Just real quickly, I do want to hear from Benjamin, but again, SUNY is very fortunate that it has this SUNY OER system-wide kind of support for open access, and that's um, really helped us in terms of the libraries has really taken the lead, if anything.
Hmm.
Now there is certainly has been pushback and so on, but it's been around enough, and it's that people have gotten grants and they see that you can get money, you can get awards and so on. So I think it's taken hold at least at our campus, it to some respect. But it is
Hmm.
a challenge to keep it going. There's no doubt. How do you keep it refreshed and keep it going all the time for new folks?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll just chime in really quickly because you hit on something, Joshua, that's really at the forefront of my mind. Um, we've really tried to take the tack that OER, open access stuff, those kinds of projects can really be value added rather than just, oh, there's no cost for the textbook, which is awesome for students. But things like what can you do pedagogically? What can you do in the classroom with your curriculum by opening things up?
Hmm.
Using sources that you can edit and tailor and make local and do all sorts of things. So even that example of the calculus teacher, well, how do I do sustainability? At least for us on our campus, math is a major like gatekeeping course that terrifies students. It's very rare to meet a student who is super excited about their math course, but this is a way, right? It's not stack sustainability as an extra thing on top of your curriculum. It's
Hmm.
embed this, right? So you're doing some kind of data analysis in the realm of sustainability as part of your math curriculum. And when you kind of bring it all together, you really enrich the curriculum, and I think pull in students who otherwise might not be as engaged, enthusiastic about some of the things we do.
Yeah, great. I love how you put that. That's really great. And it does remind me that a lot of the original math and science comes from being naturalists and, observing what's happening out in nature. So it's not as difficult of an addition to the course often as it seems at first, in my opinion, at least. Um, yeah. And the project itself is a learning experience. So like um we are treating the whole project like a learning experience, like learn about open scholarship. And there's a tremendous amount of curiosity, at least for my students, about that topic, especially because they have to spend so much subscribing to different programs and buying books. And for web developers, it's a lot more normal, like GitHub, to kind of share your work and kind of fork it. So there's already a culture amongst like, Christoph's group for doing this work, but it's not as typical in other fields.
I just jump in to expand a little bit, Benjamin, on what you said, and thank you for putting that so well about that integration of sustainability through the curriculum, right? Like that you can use that for the topic of the project kind of thing. And I think to extend that to involving students in the creation and or co-creation of content that could then be shared and given back to the community, right? So they're contributing to the larger pool of information and content that's out there. I know we have a lot of faculty who have students, and I know of one in particular in computer science who has his students co-author their textbook as part of their class. So they create it as the semester goes on. And I think that that's just a great way to leverage all of this together into creating something tangible, and
Hmm.
useful.
Right.
Are
I
there
know.
other thoughts, questions? Yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to mention Pressbooks seems like SUNY does
Oh,
have a
right.
Pressbooks account. Is that correct? Like you
That's
can,
correct.
yeah. So Pressbooks is a way without all, um, like, yeah, you can have it up online and then also a book you can download, and students can contribute a chapter to it, and build a collaborative textbook. That seems like a great resource.
Yeah. A link in the chat
I
for that.
I have one real quick one. I don't know if you have
That's,
we'll have time to.
that's my dog.
Oh, sorry. Beautiful. Okay. Of just real quick, was Springer able to help you? You know, we're all kind of struggling with this April 26th, everything must be ADA accessible. And your things is so visual. Your things are so incredibly visual and beautiful. Um, has Springer been any help at all to you in that regard?
They've been on their production side is handling a lot of that, but there has been correspondence about that. But it's true that they do handle that aspect of it. For Earthrise Commons, like it's part of the grant that everything be accessible. And that's a great learning experience too, because, in graphic design, you want to make everything look cool and interesting, but actually there are some standards, for accessibility and inclusion that we need to pay attention to. And so we have a rubric for that. Yeah,
Right.
and there's a plugin called Wave
Mhm.
or an extension called Wave for Chrome that's quite useful and will analyze the accessibility of a web page,
Mhm.
for example. But you're
Yep.
right. I know it's a big deal, especially in PDFs even. And it's a lot of work to make everything accessible for sure.
You have
Thank you.
materials that are downloadable within your Commons, but I did notice like a lot of the lesson plans and so forth are text that's on the page, right? So it's that makes it more accessible than downloading a PDF that may actually not have been created in an accessible format. But
Yeah.
Having things in multiple ways as well is helpful for folks too. But yeah, we use Wave for all of our sites as
Yeah.
we're
And it,
going through a big redesign now for accessibility.
yeah, and it's a learning experience. Yeah, again, like like we're learning about accessibility and like our own biases or like things that we might miss. And that's part of the fun of the project is like the students are engaged in that topic who do involve themselves with this project.
That's great. So before I wrap up, I need to know what your dog's name is.
Oh, this is Momo, and you can see he's usually here with me. So
Yeah, I see that. Momo is wonderful.
yeah.
That's great. And
Yeah.
and sleepy.
He's sleepy.
Well,
He wants to walk. That's why he's here. So
well, thanks for
I'll
joining us, Momo. I will wrap us up so that you can go for your walk. My dog Knox is under my feet and wants the same thing. So
oh
I understand. All right. Well, I just appreciate everyone participating in the great conversation today as well, and Joshua for sharing this fantastic resource with us and giving us a lot to think about. We wrap up our sessions for Open Ed today at noon, one more on faculty-driven innovation for Gateway course success, and that is with one of our partners, Lumen Learning, to talk about OER-based courseware. So I put some links in the chat to our OEW website where we will post recordings, but they will also be posted on our YouTube playlist. You can get that at any time. There is a survey there to help us with Open Ed programming as we look to next year. And of course, there are numerous activities happening all over the globe for Open Ed Week. So
Mhm.
check out the OE Global website for more. Thank you again for joining us. Have a great weekend, everyone.